Hey all, today we're doing a 357 Snub Nose Showdown. Let's get into it. Now if you like this content, like, sub, shares, all that good stuff, I really appreciate it. Also down below, coupon codes and merch to help support the channel. So what are we talking about today? So I have here the Kimber K6S and the Colt King Cobra, and we're going to compare the features, and I'm going to talk about what I like, what I don't like, and overall which gun has the better features. A couple disclaimers I want to get out of the way. I'm not really going to talk about grips because you can get a variety of different grips for both of these guns. I will talk a little bit about aftermarket parts. As far as grips, there's really something out there for everybody, so I'm not going to talk about that. Also, yes, I know that this gun is a 3-inch with a hammer. This is a 2-inch without a hammer. The features are the same, so if I were to make these both 2-inch guns that are double action only, which is an option with both guns, the sights, the triggers, the capacity, all that would still be the same. So really the core features of each gun are easily compared, even though the models are slightly different. So I'm going to start with sights. So I'll start with the King Cobra. So the King Cobra has a gold dot up front, and then you have kind of a trench gutter rear sight. Now, it's not a bad sight picture. In fact, I give you a good sight there. It actually makes a pretty nice sight picture. A little bit old school in the fact that it's milled into the frame and is not it's not changeable, at least not easily, but definitely a decent sight. Moving over to the Kimber, you have a white dot up front, and then you have two white dots in the rear, and both of these are changeable. You can knock out the pin, change this, and then this can also be taken out and changed, and then you have a really nice sight picture. Trying to get it to focus right there, right? Overall, I gotta say the Kimber has a nicer sights, both in the fact that you can completely change them, but also just as a stock sight picture from the factory, this is a better set of sights. It's a really nice deep notch that you're really able to get a good sight picture on. Now that doesn't mean the King Cobra is bad, it just, at the end of the day, I think the Kimber has a nicer set of sights. So I'm going to talk about accuracy, but only briefly, because at the end of the day, these guns are pretty much identical for accuracy. I've shot both of these guns out 15 yards or so with some steel plates. I've had no issues hitting them. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the operator of the gun on how accurate they are. I really can't say one or the other is more accurate. I think they're both plenty accurate for self-defense. Opening on the gun, so the Kimber has a push button, right? So you push the button in, cylinder pops open, right? Kind of reminds you of how Ruger has their setup where it's a push button rather than a push forward or a pull back. So really easy to actuate. They kind of did some knurling texture here on the button, so really easy to operate, nice and smooth. The Colt King Cobra has the traditional Colt release where you pull back. So you pull back and pull the cylinder out, right, like so. Once you get used to it, it's very easy. Just have to make sure to pull back. Overall, which would I say? They're kind of a tie. That's really personal preference. I didn't shoot Colts for a long time, and I finally got my hands on some and started shooting them and realizing that while I thought maybe this cylinder release would be weird because everything else is a push forward or push in, and this is a pullback, honestly, I got used to it, no problem, no time at all. So I really got to say, that's kind of personal preference. I really won't say that one or the other is worse or better. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about triggers. So showing up both these guns, right? The Kimber is a little bit wider than the Colt. The Colt has a little bit thinner trigger. I have heard some people say that that gets annoying after a while. I have not had that issue. I've only ever put about 100 rounds through the gun at one time, so maybe after a few hundred starts to get annoying. I don't have those deeper pockets. Whereas the Kimber is a little bit wider, so I will say that's a little bit nicer having the wider trigger. While it doesn't bother me, wider is usually better in that sort of thing just because more real estate for your finger to grab onto. As far as the pulls themselves, so the Kimber is very, I'd say, non-stacking. So when I pull it through right, it kind of just pulls through real nice and smooth, and you get used to knowing where the break is going to be just from shooting it a bunch, right? Because it really doesn't stack, and it pulls through nice and smooth. The Colt King Cobra, now when I pull through this, right, it pulls through pretty smooth, and then about there is when it starts to stack a little bit. That's how I know that it's about to break. Right, there it is. So I will say this is a good trigger. This is a great trigger. This one stacks a little bit. This one, not so much. I guess at the end of the day, if I had to award which I like more, I'd probably say the Kimber, but they really do both have decent triggers. Just think that Kimber is a little bit smoother. So now we're going to talk about fit and finish. And what I'm going to talk about that is, one, these two examples, and then overall the companies. These two examples, pretty much decent, no issues. The Kimber K6S, I did actually have a burr right here up on the crown that I had to go get fixed. Not a major deal, something that should have been caught in QC, but it wasn't. But overall, the fit and finish on this is pretty nice. And then with the King Cobra, I've had no major issues, actually no issues at all. Fit and finish is really good on this gun, to the point where actually the only defect, I don't know how well it shows up here, but you can kind of see right here, looks like a line in the finish. That's no big deal. It's a gun. I'm carrying it. I really don't care. Fit and finish on the Colt has been really nice. Now the companies as a whole. So Kimber recently got bought out by CZ, and I've heard a lot of different stories about quality kind of getting bumped up since then. I have heard issues where when you go to the longer barrel versions with the adjustable sights, them having issues. I think they probably have been rectified by now from what I've understanding. But I did hear about issues like that, and I did hear about early issues with the ejector rod not being right, where this part would, the little knurling here would get stuck. This has not had that issue, and they fixed that issue earlier on pre me buying this. It seems like Colt quality control has bumped up, and this gun seems pretty decent. Kimber, on the other hand, now it's a shame because I've really, the sights I've liked more. The trigger on this is a little bit nicer. While this gun, besides the burr on the front of the crown, was a little bit of a issue, this gun's been fine. I've started hearing a lot of different things from Kimber. So this gun is made in Yonkers, New York. And they've since, from what I understand, switched their manufacturing facilities. And the Kimber K6XS that I actually got recently ended up going back because it had poor frame fitment and had a lot of end play. And overall, it just wasn't something that I wanted to spend $600 on. But I will say I have heard a lot of negative about Kimber recently, and again with my issue and the gun that I ended up not even keeping. I got a hand fit and finish and quality control to Colt. Kimber builds a really nice gun. I think sometimes they just get lost in the last the last little bit of finishing up and making it come together. So finally, I'm going to talk about aftermarket support for the two guns, and what I'm meaning by that is holsters, speed loaders, grips, all that kind of stuff. How hard is it to get the additional extra parts you might need to make the gun your own? Starting with grip. Now, I know I wasn't going to talk about grips, but I'll say this. Grips for both of these are very easy to get. While there isn't 8 billion options out there, there's wood, there's G10 for this, there's wood, there's G10 for that. Again, the Colt King Cobra, you can actually put the old Detective Special grips on there like I did, grip adapter, give it that old school vibe. But there's plenty of different options, 2-finger, 3-finger, all that stuff, full-on combat grips. It's pretty easy to get grips. I will say the one gripe about the K6S is their double action version and their double action version and then their double action single action version. They don't take the same grip. So I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's a reason. I don't know what it is to know if it's a good one. But other than that, you can get plenty of grips for both guns. Moving on to holsters. So holsters are pretty easy to get for the Kimber, a little bit harder for the Colt. With this being a slightly newer gun, there's not as many options out there. Companies are coming out with this stuff, but if you're looking for something that's going to be much easier to get a holster, the Kimber K6S, in fact, a few J-frame holsters I've tried have actually fit this. It's a little bit tight, and by that I mean leather holsters. Obviously, Kydex won't fit, but some of the leather holsters, you can kind of smush it in there and it'll stretch out and make it work. Where the King Cobra, you might have a little bit harder of a surge, only because with this really big trigger guard, it kind of, from what I understand in the research I did, it kind of eliminates some of your options, because while you might just think a K-frame holster would work, apparently they don't, and some of the stuff I tried didn't fit. But holster options, definitely a little bit easier for the Kimber K6S. As far as speed loaders, there's options out there for both guns. There's not a ton of options out there for either gun. So 5-star is kind of the winner for both of these. They're the ones, I'm pretty sure, who make the Kimber branded speed loader for the Kimber, and it works in both guns without issue. It's very thin. It's all metal, so they can make it thinner than some of the plastic ones. I've tried some of the HKS speed loaders, and they kind of work in both guns, but with some sanding down, they actually work a little bit better. That's something you got to do at your own risk because you don't want to sand too thin and they're brittle. But there is options. Colt claims the Detective Special speed loader works with this gun. I tried one that I had that I hadn't sanded down because I had one that I sanded down and it works fine. But I've tried just a straight out of the box one. It hung up a little bit. I actually think it might be defective, so I might have to get another Detective Special speed loader to see if a factory one works in here. But I'd sanded it down for the Kimber and it worked just fine. Safariland, I think you're kind of out of luck. Packmeyer's making their new quote competition speed loader. A review coming on them soon. It kind of fits, but long story short, I don't really recommend that speed loader because even after spraying with the silicone everybody says to, I just wasn't able to get it to work that good. So there is options out there, but both guns you're going to have to do a little hunting, a little bit of experimenting, and a little bit of searching on the forums, unless you just go with the small 5-star speed loader that works for both guns without issue. So finally, if I had to only choose one of these, which would it be? Well, I'll be honest, I'm going to cop out a little bit because I can't decide. So here's the thing. Both of these guns are very similar to each other. 6-shot capacity, all steel, available in double action, single action, double action only, plenty of different grip options. Both have, they're small enough to where, depending upon the grips you choose, you're going to have to make sure to test your speed loader with those grips, make sure they work. Um, the sights on this are a little bit nicer. The trigger's a little bit nicer. But honestly, it's not nice enough to make me say that I wouldn't choose this one. Because this one, again, while it still has, just a milled into the frame style sight, honestly, for self-defense, I mean, I've been shooting this gun out at 15, 20 yards, and I'm still able to hit, like a 10-inch steel gong. Same thing with this one. It Neither gun has features that make it stand out and immediately make it better than the other one. You want the more modern design or you want the more classic design. At the end of the day, that's pretty much what it comes down to. I guess if I absolutely had to choose, take QC out of the equation, I would probably go the Kimber just because of the slightly better sights and the slightly better trigger. But honestly, that doesn't by any means disqualify the Colt King Cobra because the sights are still pretty nice, the trigger is still pretty nice. And again, if you're more of a classic vibe, it still has it be a pretty close race between the two. So that's my quick thoughts. Put down below, what do you think? Which did you go with? Which are you thinking of going with? And why did you go with it? Put down below what you think, and have a good day.